This is Things Police See, First-Hand Accounts, with your host, Steve Gould.
Hey guys, welcome to the podcast that interviews active and retired police officers about their most intense, bizarre, and sometimes humorous moments on the job. I'm your host, Steve Gould. Thank you for joining me here. This is episode number 75, if you can believe it. So this, I want to say up front, this is obviously an audio episode like all of them, but also we have a video component now. So if you want to go to YouTube and search Things Police See, you can go there and you can see video of the interview. We're just kind of building that audience. So if you could like and subscribe, that would be fantastic. Now, our guest today, I'm very excited about. This gentleman started his career as a patrolman, became a detective, moved on to the U.S. Marshal Service, climbed the ranks there, and is currently a New York Times and USA Today best-selling author. He's well known for his Arliss Cutler and the Jericho Quinn series. And of course, in 2017, he joined the Tom Clancy universe, writing the Jack Ryan series, which is just phenomenal. So as of, I think, the 27th of April, just not too long ago, Bone Rattle came out. It's the third book in the Arliss Cutler series. Fantastic book, getting amazing reviews. And I have him here on the podcast. So I want to hear, of course, we want his stories. We want his war stories. We want to hear that. But I want to hear about how this happens. How do you become a writer from being a copper, from being a patrolman to being a marshal to being a best-selling author? And then, is the character you, or is it how much is based on you? Is it just help you be more technical with your writing? How did you foster your skills as a writer while being a cop? I have so many questions for the guy. He's only got an hour probably about, so I could keep him on here for 3 or 4 hours, I'm sure. So without further ado, let me bring him on. Marc Cameron, welcome to the podcast, sir.
Hey, thanks for having me. I appreciate it, Steve.
My pleasure. And I understand you are in beautiful state of Alaska.
Yes, we are. Eagle River, just north of Anchorage. It's a beautiful day. Still got some snow in our yard, but it's going fast.
It's awesome. My cousin has a house in Alaska. She lived there for like 10 years with her husband, and she will show me like the most awe-inspiring, breathtaking pictures from her daily life. And then sometimes just like a bull moose will come into her yard and knock over her bird feeder. So it's...
Oh yeah. Yeah. We had to buy 2 new sprinklers last summer because it was so hot, and the moose came in and stood in our sprinklers and just stomped them to death. Getting
Really?
Cool in the sprinklers. Yeah. So, and yesterday we actually went for a drive, and very rare. We don't see this often, but saw a big gray wolf cross the road. Whoa. And then right up the road had a little coyote that looked like maybe the wolf had been after it. It was limping along. But
wow,
yeah, it's a great place to live. We raised our kids here, and it's pretty amazing.
That is amazing. Wow, that's no joke. Great wolves.
Yeah.
So you're going on a hike or a walk. You're thinking about that stuff. You're definitely packing.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. That's funny. I know people. I was at the range once, and a guy had one of those giant silver handguns, a revolver, and I was sitting there watching him for a while, and he's like, "You want to shoot it?" I'm like, "Oh, hell yeah, I want to shoot that thing." It was called the Raging Bull. It was made by Taurus, and it's big, and it shoots a 454 Cazul or something. It's
Cazul, 454 Cazul. Yeah.
Oh man, talk about a round making me feel like a Nancy boy. He loaded it. I mean, this was 10 years ago, so even then it was like a couple bucks a shot, and now it's probably $10 a shot. But I shot 3, and I was like, it was like a sledgehammer on my wrist. I was like, you know what? Glad I had the opportunity. And he said he straps it on the front of him because he does a lot of hunting in Alaska, and it was for bears, protection.
Yeah, I carry a small Model 29, so the Smith & Wesson Model 29. It's a round butt, but it's got a 3-inch barrel. It's ported, so it's actually pretty comfortable to shoot. But I can shoot like buffalo boar, kind of hard cast 44 Magnums out of it, and it'll give you. Cazul forehead and Cazul wrist are a real thing. You don't want to shoot your buddy's 454 Cazul right before you have to do a qual course, or you'll be kind of rattled. So,
yeah, I've seen the Cazul or whatever round forehead before when the guy hands the the giant handgun to his hot girlfriend with the
Yeah, exactly.
you know, the hiked up short jeans, and she bam.
Oh yeah. Yep, exactly. It'll get you. Yeah, Alaska is a different place to. I mentioned earlier that my youngest son is a police officer here, and we have a lot of discussions about what it's like to be law enforcement in Alaska. You know, and I mean, it's not a common thing in other parts of the country, at least where I've lived, to have to put down moose on the road monthly. You know, that get hit by cars. And in fact, one of my first calls when I came up to, or first experiences with Alaska, I just moved up here. It was about this time of the year in April, and the Marshal Service had, I was working with the task force, the fugitive task force, and we had this guy, figured out where he was. He hadn't barricaded, but we thought he might. So we called the local PD, called Anchorage PD, and I was new, so I didn't know the area, and there was another deputy running it. So he had gone to the front door to knock with an APD, Anchorage police officer, and I was working the side, and then we had deputies in the back and officers in the back, and there was a APD SWAT officer. It wasn't a SWAT call out, but he had an MP5 with him, or maybe an M4. I think it was MP5. So he had his small SMG with him, and I was on the other side of the window, and there's probably like maybe a 12-foot easement between there and the privacy fence. And of course, I'm facing inbound, worrying about the bad guy inside, hearing the knock on the door, and I hear the APD SWAT guy go like that, like look out, kind of the universal be careful sign. And I turn around, and there's a moose calf trotting between me and the fence. And here comes Mama, and she was, I swear she was 7 feet tall at the withers, and just right there, I could have reached out and scratched her back. But instead, I, sucked up against the wall and had my puny little, I think I was carrying a SIG at the time, puny little SIG, thinking I'm not going to be able to shoot this Mack truck if she gets onto me.
This would be a slight annoyance for her.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, my neighbor here where I live I live around the Quabbin Reservoir in Massachusetts. He said they saw bull moose on their property. So moose have started getting into Massachusetts, which I think is awesome. You know, I think I would probably fully evacuate into my pants if I saw one on a walk, but because they are like, giant. Oh, they're big, furry tractors.
Our kids growing up would commonly call. My wife started teaching when they were in junior high or elementary, and went back to teaching full time. It was very not uncommon at all for them to call me at work saying, "Dad, we can't catch the bus because there's a moose in the front yard." And I would say, go out the back door. You're fine. People have been going to school in Alaska for a long time. Yeah. But and they might reroute a cross country track meet because of moose. It's a cool place to live because it's so different, and you never know what you're gonna run in, encounter.
Absolutely. Early in my law enforcement career, I worked for natural resources on Cape Cod, and one of the summer guys that worked for me was in the Coast Guard, and he left and became an Alaskan state trooper. So I thought, well, this is cool, So he goes up there, goes through academy, and he's home 2 months after academy. And he just said, I couldn't do it. He said he goes, after like my second time being flown to a domestic, I said, really? After all that specific Alaskan training, you couldn't do it? He's like, nah, I'm miserable. I just couldn't do it.
I have many friends in the troopers and have worked with the troopers out in the bush quite a bit. The marshals and the state troopers really team up a lot, and man, my hat goes off to them. It's like a small village, and these are really neat villages too. The cultures out there are just, one of my books deals specifically with, in fact, all my Arliss Cutter books deal with Native issues and, how we interact with, really, it's their land. They were here first, and how we interact with the Yupik and the Inupiaq and the Athabascans and all over the state. Well, I remember going out to a small village on the Yukon, and there was 3 troopers there, 2 troopers and a sergeant. And they handled a huge area, but there was no sleeping because everybody knew where they lived. So it's not like they went to the police department and called you. If there was a domestic, the wife is banging on your door.
Oh, my goodness.
And so even if you're on a day off, if there's, somebody that cut someone's boat fuel line, they're at your house saying, so-and-so cut my fuel line. And you think of yourself as a patrol officer or / detective, because they do a little everything out there, where you're kind of like Andy Griffith in the town where everybody knows where you live. And there's a certain amount of violence that goes, and it's not because of who they are, but it's more where they are. Isolated like that, there's a certain amount of violence that just goes with a small village like that. And the troopers just never get a rest. It's like I say, my hat goes off to them. It's hard work, but boy, the ones that love it, they love it. It's a calling for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
I was applying with them. I had tried to get on with the Alaska State Troopers when I was with the PD in Texas, but during that time in the mid 80s, they wouldn't hire you unless you were an Alaska resident. You had to have lived here for a year before Anchorage PD would hire you or the state troopers would hire you. So I applied with the North Slope Borough Police, which the borough, Alaska doesn't have counties, we have boroughs. And the whole top third of Alaska, from the mountain range, the Brooks Range that runs across the top of Alaska north, which is an area about the size of Montana, is one municipality. And so the police chief lives in Barrow, and the support and admin people, and then they assign North Slope Borough PD officers to Anaktuvik Pass, Wainwright, Kaktovik, all around these little native villages. So it's kind of like they're not troopers, but they have the same lifestyle as a trooper, except they're 2 on, 2 off. So I'd applied with them and was in the process of going to take the polygraph and the physical in Seattle, fly from Texas, when the Marshals hired me. So, but I wanted to get to Alaska from the beginning. But good law enforcement up here. It truly is the frontier. Do things a lot different than I did in the lower 48.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah, I went to academy with a lot of city cops, and these guys and gals are just used to big piling people, having 10 people show up to back you up. Like, that's like normal. Mm-hmm. They're like, when they talk to a country cop, they're like, backup's 40 minutes? Like, what are you going to do? It's like, it might not be a lot of action, but when it is, you're scared you could be scared for your life.
It's a big difference. Yep. It's a big difference in the way you handle things. In fact, I have lots of friends in both agencies, the APD, Anchorage Police, and the troopers. And we were talking about a guy that had holed up and shot it out with this particular agency at a hospital. They ended up beanbagging him. He dropped the gun. APD's philosophy was, Anchorage Police's philosophy was, wait for backup and then approach as a group. The troopers' philosophy was, run up there and kick the gun out of the way and arrest the guy, because backup may not come for days. And so it's a different, and obviously as a father of a son at Anchorage Police, I'm all for waiting for backup when you can, but sometimes that's just the way it is. Yeah,
that's true. That's a real contrast, because Anchorage is a real city. There's hundreds of thousands of people there.
Almost 300,000 people, so it's big.
That's big. So Mark, can you take us back to young Officer Mark Cameron when he had his first hot call, or what you responded to as a hot call, the first thing, that time your adrenaline got going and you were like, whoa.
Yeah. I was just talking, I saw the questions and I was talking to my wife about this, and I remember the feelings, but I can't, I have so many when you're young, and I was pretty naive when I came on police work when I was just over 21. So barely old enough to buy my own bullets and gun, I was very young, very naive. That was back in the 80s where everybody had probably been in a scuffle or two in high school or junior high, because they didn't kick you out like they do now. Right. So even though we were naive, we were not maybe as civilized as they expect you to be nowadays. So, as a young patrol officer, every little thing was kind of so new to me. And I worked in a small department, like 40 people total. That's sworn, admin, everybody. And so every little call, but I remember early on, I don't remember how long I'd been on, but I was still pretty new on patrol, working Sundays. And it was early in the morning, and one of the sergeants said, "Hey, let's meet for coffee," like people do on Sundays.
Sure.
And the troopers would come, and we'd sort of have our own little intel meeting.
Little roll call.
A little roll call, and little intel meeting at the Whataburger in Texas, and sit and chat. And so I was heading for that, and the tones went off. And I'm sure you guys have tones in your department or wherever, but it's that high pitched signal that the dispatch puts out when there's a major accident or something big where everybody needs to shut up. They, now like here, I think they say, hold the channel or hold for traffic or whatever. But this was a tone, and the dispatcher came over the radio, and I was probably the place where I worked in Weatherford. The main street runs out from the square, the county courthouse square, to Interstate 20. So part of this big interstate runs through our city limits. So troopers worked it, we worked it, county worked it. So I was just a few 100 meters from the entrance to the interstate, the I-20 corridor that runs across the top of Texas, or middle of Texas. And the tones went off, and the dispatcher said, sort of oddly, she dropped all 10 codes, all signals, and just in plain English, she said, "Trooper so-and-so has been kidnapped. He's was able to get a cell phone, told me that he's gone." And this was 1980 something. So cell phones were affixed to the cars, they were inside vehicles. We didn't have them in police work at all. But all she said was, he's been kidnapped. He's headed westbound on I-20 at such and such mile marker. He needs help. And I was right on top of it. I was hundreds of, a few hundred meters away. And I was this would have been 85, maybe 85, beginning of 86. And I was in a 1978 Dodge Diplomat or Plymouth Grand Fury, same car, but it would go fast, but it had no suspension at all.
Just fast and straight.
If you're lucky, I got on, and when I got on the highway, I could see the trooper car up ahead of me. Luckily, he wasn't in one of the Mustang pursuit vehicles. He was in another Plymouth Grand. I think he was in a Crown Vic.
Right.
And I was like an air hockey puck drifting all. Looking back, that's probably the closest I've ever come to dying, was pegging out on the radar. It said 140 or 120. My speedometer said 140 or one way or the other, and then it just stopped.
Oh, I'm sure your tires were barely touching.
Man, just drifting back and forth, and I could see the car up ahead of me, and I was actually gaining on it, thinking. And then all I could see was the trooper. There was nobody else in the car. And I thought, oh my gosh, they're down below. They're holding a gun on him. Come to find out, he had been in a shootout. The people had stolen his car. As soon as they drove away in his car, he flagged down a motorist. The motorist happened to have a vehicle phone.
A gigantic phone.
Exactly. And then, the motor, back then you couldn't carry a gun in Texas. It was illegal unless you were traveling. So it wasn't like today. Guns were against the law for people to carry unless you had unless you met certain criteria, which was
that's not the Texas I know, Mark.
No, it's different. It's way different.
Oh.
He had the guy driving the car that he flagged over said, "If you won't arrest me, I've got a 357 under my seat." And the trooper goes, "No, yeah, absolutely, give it to me." Well, unbeknownst to that guy, he cleaned his gun and his ammo with WD-40. And unbeknownst to him, that's a penetrant, which completely makes your rounds inert. Ugh. And so they actually chased down the patrol car, pitted it with this private vehicle.
Oh my gosh.
The trooper got out, and this is all happening before I got on the road. Yeah. The trooper got out, drew down, click, 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 all 6 rounds. None of them worked. The people, the bad guy car pulled up, got the other guy out of the car. They speed off, and then this other officer gets back in his car. I jump in, and that's where I came in. Trooper given pursuit. They take off running, and we were in this kind of long procession of. And then you know what pursuits are like. it turned into a gigantic parade of every time we go past
picking up a cop car every time you go by a city.
Yeah, you pick up a cop car every time you go past the exit. And as it turned out, we ended up catching one of the guys. The other one fled into the woods. I happened to be at the right place in the right time when a Texas Ranger helicopter came out. Again, I'm so new and fresh. This Ranger DPS helicopter came out, and the Ranger, who I kind of knew tangentially, meeting him around, he said, "Hey, you want to come with us? We need a spotter." And I was like, "Riding a helicopter and chase a bad guy? Yeah."
Oh, yeah.
So I spent the day basically just jumping out of helicopters, clearing houses, and then I guess any statute of limitations is long past, but we worked all day, and then the other guy just disappeared, the bad guy. We couldn't find him. And I ended up being assigned to a roadblock kind of west of town, several miles. And we figured that he got in a trunk and snuck out before we could set up on him or whatever. And, this guy had shot at the trooper. He was a bad dude. He was trying to chase him around the car, trying to kill him. The only reason he didn't kill him was he ran out of, we were carrying revolvers at the time, and he ran out of bullets. And the Rangers pulled up beside us and said, "We found so-and-so, the bad guy, and over in Fort Worth, and he's dead." And I said, you had to shoot it out with him? And he goes, "We found him and he's dead." And I said, "Well, was he alive when you found him?" And the Ranger said, "We found him and he is dead." And I said, "Good enough." I guess you don't shoot at a Texas Highway Patrol officer in 1985.
Yeah.
So
I'm not going to ask the question again.
Yeah, exactly. But I learned a lot about how dangerous. Since then I've seen wrecks and police officers and FBI agent I know was killed in a vehicle wreck. And there's like I say, that was probably, even though I didn't know it at the time, I was too young and immature to realize how dangerous driving 135, 140 down the highway in a 10-year-old car.
Yeah.
Particularly that in that day and age, even the tire, one tire blowout is very dangerous.
Yeah. Big boat with a lot of horsepower and no suspension. I know. Yeah. The first cop job I had, we had a four lane undivided highway through town with a lot of speeding issues and fatality accidents. So they always wanted us hammering traffic. So I just got used to driving fast and turning left, just patrolling, boom, moving radar. I never forget one morning I spun around and I punched it. It was like, 5:45 in the morning. So the commute wasn't really picked up yet. It was just starting to get busy. I'm doing 80, boom. And this guy, this older gentleman, pulls out right in front of me out of a side road. And I just, like that, and I could feel the car lift.
Oh, yeah.
And I just missed this guy because I knew I couldn't slam him on because it would just lock and I'd be. So I had to steer around it. And that stuck with me. That was it. I was like, you know what?
Oh, yeah.
It's not worth it. That for 15 miles an hour over the speed limit, I'm not hammering down like that.
Absolutely. And back then, and I hate to keep, these kids today talking like an old dude, but back then, I remember vividly when Texas passed a law that you had to wear a seatbelt. We as police officers, not out loud, but among each other, we were upset because we thought of all the million ways that a seatbelt was going to impede us jumping out of the car. We need to get out of the car, and don't make us do that, Sarge. And boy, this is going to be horrible. So the backstory of that is I wasn't wearing a seatbelt. I was going 100 and whatever miles an hour, completely free to exit the vehicle at 100 and whatever miles an hour if I flipped. And it was, if I have bad nightmares about anything, it's that chase.
Yeah, absolutely. My father was a cop, started in the 70s, 32 years. And he said there was a lot of cars on the road then that didn't have seatbelts. And they had like metal dashboards. He goes, "Steve, I go to a rollover and everybody be dead. I go to rollovers now. Everybody's outside the car. Like, hey, can I go in and get my CDs, or whatever?" It's like,
exactly.
You guys are okay.
Big difference.
Oh, my dad said everybody's heads off. Their arms are all broken. It's like, it's.
Oh yeah, it's completely different. Completely so much safer now. I mean, now we had a Volkswagen Passat, and the whole thing was engineered so motor would come down and slide underneath underneath the people. And I don't know how many old vehicle accidents I've worked where the motor was in the guy's lap,
Yeah.
He was not doing very well.
Yeah, absolutely. Marc, I have some more questions for you, but I kind of specifically want to hear about how you go from the police work we've been talking about to the U.S. Marshals. How did that spark your interest? Because I know, if I'm being honest with you, what I know about U.S. Marshals probably comes from Tom Clancy books, or from the movies, right. Like The Fugitive or something, which it seems, it all seems very, it's easy to romanticize and be like, I'm going to be a bounty hunter for these criminals. But the only U.S. Marshal I've actually met, I met an air marshal actually. He said it was the worst job he ever had. It was at a Christmas party. He was like, way different. He was like, my job sucks. So, but the only U.S. Marshals in the Marshal Service I met work at the federal courthouse, and which is totally not the bounty hunter dude. So, how did it unravel?
Well, the Marshal Service is made up of it's all deputy. There is a presidentially appointed marshal for each district. And there's 94 districts within the United States. So Alaska has one. Bigger states like Texas have 4 or 3 or 2.
Like Boston will have one.
Well, Massachusetts will have one. Connecticut has one. Maine has one, but Virginia has a couple. New York has 4. It has to do with the judicial districts. Anytime if there's 4 U.S. attorneys and 4 chief judges, there's going to be 4 United States Marshals. And so those are political appointments. They work at the pleasure of the president, and every time the administration changes, they change. All the rest of us are special agents. We just call ourselves deputy marshals. So we're 1811s, just like the FBI, the Secret Service, the DEA, ATF, whatever.
Is there any connection to those marshals and the marshals, like Marshal Dillon from
absolutely.
That's the same service, just it kind of have an evolution.
Service.
Okay.
Yep, absolutely. The same service started in 1789 by George Washington. It's funny, the Postal Service will sometimes say they're the oldest federal law enforcement agency, and we don't even argue with them because they're the oldest agency, but they didn't have a law enforcement component for decades.
Yeah. Postal inspectors, screw those guys.
We were started as the United States Marshal Service in 1789 during the judiciary, when basically they needed somebody besides the military to enforce federal law. Consequently, this is one of the reasons I really liked going into it as a law enforcement officer. If you look at other agencies, DEA, and I have friends in all these agencies, so I'm certainly not demeaning them, but just this is the way it is, that a DEA agent will have certain laws, certain things that they investigate, and they're codified on their credential, 18 USC, whatever.
Okay.
The Border Patrol and Customs will have 18 USC, section whatever. And this is what they enforce. Some agencies are so specific that they can carry a gun for self-protection, but they can't. Their power of arrest are very limited, so they end up coming and getting us to come help them. These are federal IG, inspectors general and things like that. So, but on the FBI's credential and on our credential, on the U.S. Marshal's credential, it says, for instance, Chief Marc Cameron is in good standing, authorized to carry a firearm, and it says authorized to enforce federal law, which means everything. Whatever the boss tells us to do, we go and do it. And so there are marshals that work federal court. All deputy marshals work federal court, but there's special deputies that you see when you walk into the court that have blue blazers and slacks, and those are contracted employees that run you through the mag and stuff like that. Those are not deputy marshals. Those are special deputies that work for a contracting agency that we pay to do the physical security of the building. They don't have powers of arrest and things like that.
I knew a guy from when I worked LAPD backgrounds. There was a guy that drove a judge around and worked at the court.
It's a great retirement job.
Yeah,
awesome.
It was like you get the little title, but you're not actually like a U.S. Marshal.
Yeah. But so when I was in high school, so I used to watch Gunsmoke with my
hell
grandpa, and then Rooster Cogburn and True Grit and all that.
Yep.
And read about deputy marshals. And then when I was in high school, I was walking. This is kind of embarrassing to tell you the truth about what I got me interested in it, but I was around. It was an old Texas county with a courthouse in the middle and a big square and parking meters all around the square. And this deputy marshal named Larry Fowler, he just passed away, but at that time he was the deputy marshal in Fort Worth. He'd come over to where I lived, and he was visiting somebody on the square, and he had a big hat, a starched, open collar shirt, starched jeans, wore his sidearm outside, not covered up on a cool Ranger rig, dressed like a Texas Ranger, but he was a deputy marshal. And he drove this big old pickup, and he opened up the pickup, took something out of the glove box, and it was a bag with a little metal collar on it, and he stretched it over the parking meter, and it said official business, U.S. Marshals. And I was probably 14, and I thought, I want that job where I can have one of those bags and not have to. I guess I was probably 15 because I was driving. Yeah. And I said, I don't want to pay for parking. I want that marshal job.
That's funny. It's funny what sticks with you.
But oddly enough, I got on with the police department later on in life, and we got a call from the marshals in Fort Worth that there was a guy that they had done some phone stuff, and they thought they knew where he was, in our city. And so me and two other officers went and surrounded the house back away from him a little bit. And so at this point, this has been the late 80s. And so and it was Larry Fowler, the same guy that I had watched him. And the only reason I know it's the same guy is because I became friends with his son in high school. So Fowler was coming over, and I remember another agency. I won't mention their name, but they're another big federal agency. And they were saying, wait for us, wait for us, wait for us. And Fowler's going, screw that. If you get him, get him. I don't care who's there. Just arrest the guy. And the difference in the thought process of wait for us so we can be part of it, or, complete the mission, really impressed me. And so I applied with the marshals, and Larry Fowler ended up doing my background, and I ended up working with him later on in the Los Angeles riots. So it was kind of a cool little career serendipity.
Yeah, that's really interesting. It's funny. I have a little story from the first agency I worked for, not a big town at all, but the marshals came into town, and there was like a little communication blip where they were obviously supposed to let the chief of police know, this guy's here, we're going to grab him, and maybe have a unit stand by if we need him or not or whatever. None of that made it through. So we got a bunch of calls. I wasn't working. I was actually a kid when this happened. But a bunch of calls about these guys, shaggy-looking dudes with guns, dragging this guy out. Well, the local police show up and pull their guns on them. So now the marshals and the cops are pointing guns at each other. And they're going they're screaming U.S. Marshal with this chain, but the cops are like, I don't care if you got a badge. He's like, you look like a friggin' you look like Charles Manson. So it was just like, this big mix up. And I just thought it was, to me, it just made them seem so badass to me. I'm like, that's so cool. They're just, they're just like kicking your door in.
It is a fun. I remember going to a town, and when I started off in Texas in the Marshal Service in the Eastern District, but we were actually north. The district starts on the top of Texas above Dallas and kind of bends around on the east side all the way down to Beaumont. So I was up on the Oklahoma border, and it was just me and one other deputy that handled that whole, I don't know, maybe 8 county area.
Oh, wow.
And we were looking for this guy, and we had finally found him. We looked for him for months, like 5 or 6 months. In fact, I used this in my book, but his girlfriends was a stripper, and when she would get nervous, she would spit like a cat, like spit, get blotchy, and just get like spitting mad. And she was such an interesting. We kept hearing about her, but she was such an interesting person that sort of we figured she would know where he was, but she was just such an interesting person to hear about. We actually, I think, started subconsciously looking for her harder than we were looking for him, so we could find her and see what she really looked like. But we ended up locating the bad guy at his sister's house in a mid-cities between Dallas and Fort Worth area. Told the Dallas office, because that's a whole different Marshal's district, that we were going to be down there. They said, have at it. They didn't want to come out in the middle of the night for that.
Sure.
We ended up arresting him, and this police department, which is a decent-sized police department, they came with us. We went in. The guy was asleep on the couch. We could see him in the glow of the aquarium. We booted the door because the sister was supposed to have guns. We booted the door. I covered the upstairs where the sister came down. My partner covered where the bad guy was, cuffed him. We walked out the door with the guy, put him in the car, and the sergeant of this police department says, all right, let's take him back to the PD and we'll get some prints and photos and get him booked in. And my partner said, nope. And we got in the car and drove away.
Yeah.
And I thought after that, we should probably be a little more communicative with the locals but it really wasn't a state. There was no need to do that.
Right.
We could have explained ourselves a little better.
Sure.
So sometimes it is easy to get carried away with the swagger, I think. But by and large, we really try hard to work very closely with the state and locals because there's not enough of us. We really have to work together. We can't be the Tommy Lee Jones, I'm here to take over your case and get out of my way, or else we'd never catch anybody.
Yeah, no, that's so true. And I mean, and I have to say that, and you probably confirmed this, that any interaction I ever had with federal agents or federal agencies, they're nothing but helpful. They were there to support us, to help us, to give us resources we didn't have. They were just good. I mean, right down to postal inspectors when you had weird stuff coming through the mail, or we used to have a secret uniform Secret Service guy lived in town, and we get counterfeits and he'd take them. He even went on ride-alongs with us just for fun. So I think you're right that that gets played up a lot in the movies. We're taking jurisdiction or whatever
Exactly.
I'm sure it happens once in a while, like you're saying, but it mostly was a very beneficial thing. And it's funny too, we had a couple of characters that worked the DEA drug task force, and they were funny. They would show up I remember going on, I was just patrol, and they'd be like, hey, we're going to this kid sold some bad heroin, killed someone. So, we're grabbing them, and we're using your detective and the drug task force and the DEA agents we're in this little staging area, and they're like, he's like, did you bring our vests? He's like, no, I didn't bring the vests. He goes, we're going to do this again without bulletproof vests? He's like, you kidding me? And it was just funny. We're just laughing, the DEA guys were like, well, screw it. Let's do it. And, come to find out, you always get those law enforcement, I'm laughing about it, but you get those law enforcement magazines, and DEA agents get shot more than anybody. It's like, geez, you really should be wearing that vest, man.
Oh yeah, absolutely. They're good folks too. I utilize, I wouldn't say that I base any one character off any one person, but boy, I glean from the just incredible men and women that I've had the opportunity to work with over the years. It's a pretty cool bunch of characters to draw from, good and bad, the bad guys as well. Yeah,
no, that's cool. So that is when you're writing your stories or coming up with plot lines and characters, you're kind of, it's like a mishmash of different personalities to kind of form one character, and probably your own experiences. And how much of the characters are you? How much would you say percentage wise?
Probably they're what when you're having a debate with someone and you're right and you're talking along, but you just can't think of the right things to say, and you get on the elevator and the elevator door's closing, what you should have said, right? Yeah. Well, as a writer, we have the benefit of reopening the elevator doors and writing the snarky comeback or the cool one-liner or bring out the evidence. And so the characters, my heroes, are what I wish I was, but certainly not who I am. I think the Arliss Cutter books are probably the most autobiographical of all of them, and they're not really truly autobiographical. If I was any character in the Cutter books, I'm Grumpy, the dead grandpa. I'm not necessarily Arliss. I am not near as cool as Arliss is, but I mentioned my youngest son's a police officer. My oldest was a OSI agent in the Air Force for a number of years. He's a physician now, but he was in law enforcement for almost 6 years. And so I really draw a lot from them as well, just really. And my daughter rides, she's not in law enforcement, but she rides motorcycles and climbs mountains. She's very adventurous. So I draw a lot from people that I know that are just the kind of folks that would run towards the sound of gunfire, because that's who I like to write about.
That's very cool. I like that. Yeah, I've seen you described as the series described as like Alaska Noir, which is kind of a romantic title. It's pretty cool.
Yeah. Well, they're definitely dark. It's in fact, I probably have scars on my legs from being at church socials or school socials or whatever and telling stories, and my wife reaching under and kicking the crap out of my shins because, like, these are civilized people. Stop telling that story.
That's awesome. That's too funny. Marc, can you think of like one of the most strange or bizarre things you dealt with, either police or marshals?
Yeah, you well know that it's a people business and people are bizarre. If you're
Amen to that,
going
brother.
to somebody's house and they're not expecting it, there's just some weird stuff in there that, everybody's got a secret sin, right?
Yep.
And when you're the coppers, you're going in and boy, there's just some strange people. I think probably one of the most bizarre cases I ever worked at where it actually came to closure was I think I was just a brand new detective, and I know I was just because I was in plain clothes and I was a brand new detective, and patrol got a call that there was a bunch of flies on the inside of an apartment window, and nobody had seen the guy in a while.
Yeah.
So you know what that's going to be.
Mail building up.
To get there. Yeah, exactly. So I happened to get there before patrol. So and while I'm telling you this, I'm thinking about a million other bizarre things that I ever saw. So me and the patrol officer went in, and there was a guy deceased under his bed, and his legs, like from the knees out, were sticking out from under the bed, and he had obviously kicked so hard that the carpet threads were like frayed.
Weird.
Where he had been kicking. And then all on the side of the wall looked like a shotgun blast. Like it was just it had been a shotgun murder, but we couldn't see the top half of his body.
Yeah.
You could just see this huge bunch of gunk on the wall that had been there a while. And the apartment was clean otherwise. It wasn't like a doper apartment or anything like that. So I remember I had the camera, and the patrol officer, who's since gone on to be a county investigator, he looked at me and he goes, "I'm not looking under there." And I said, "Well, come on, just look under there and tell me what's like before I look down there." And so we're like arguing who's going to look under, and because we know this guy's going to be murdered with a shotgun or whatever.
Right.
Turns out we looked under. Turns out he was intact, but he was had been there a while, so he was already discolored and all of that. So we ended up calling. In fact, the patrol officer I was with did a redial of his last number called. Ended up getting the pharmacy. We were able to find out what kind of meds he was taking. Turned out he was on some meds for gastritis, so stomach pain. And when I was underneath taking pictures of the body, we saw some blocks under the head of the bed. And what had happened, he was trying to diet. He was a single guy trying to, hang out with the women and whatnot.
Sure.
And he was living on pretty much a diet of chicken strips and beer, light beer, and
food of champions.
And then exactly. And like probably bulimic. So he has messed up some of his system, and he got this gastritis, and he was underneath the bed trying to prop up the bed. Cause if you have gastritis, if you sleep at an angle, it's a little safe, feels a little better.
Oh.
And we're piecing all this together, right?
Yeah.
So he gets under the bed, he's putting it on the blocks, and the bed falls on him and hits him in the belly, and his insides rupture, like his esophagus ruptures, tremendous pain. He's kicking and kicking and kicking. He bleeds out internally and dies 2 weeks before.
Oh.
over a period of time, his body swelled
Yes.
and lifted the bed completely off the ground.
Yeah.
And then popped. And when it popped, it painted the whole wall of the apartment with what we thought was a shotgun blast. But it, looking back at it now, I can kind of tell it in sort of detached, dispassionate way. But when we were in it, it was horrifying. Because it looked like some kind of axe murder scene or shotgun murder scene. But it was analytically, it was a really good. Experience in really looking at the clues, solving, bit by bit by bit, detaching ourselves from the the real pictures of the situation. And the one thing I remember about that, and the reason I know I was in plain clothes, is because so we solved it standing there. It took us like an hour and a half with calls back and forth to the doctor and all that. And of course, then the autopsy eventually confirmed it. So we solved it pretty much, and then everybody left but me. And when the mortuary service got there, it was me and like a 72-year-old mortuary driver. And so I had to help load the guy into the body bag and all of that. And he ended up popping and getting on my slacks, my new Wrangler pants. And, I just threw them away. I just couldn't abide putting those in our family laundry. So so that was bizarre, but it was a teaching experience as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Anytime I see those guys roll up with one person, I'm like, "Where's your buddy?
Exactly.
Where's your buddy?"
You're the buddy.
Yeah, exactly. It's funny. It's not funny, but it's bizarre how it, like you saying earlier, when you get into police work, you're just kind of like doe-eyed about it. Because you've not, there's no way Academy cannot do it for you when it comes to like what you're going to walk into. And I remember going to one of my first unattended deaths, and the human body just reacts differently under all circumstances. And where I was working, it was super humid, like 90 during the day. Yeah. And this guy had been dead for like a week, and he had sweatpants on, lying on his bed, lying in his spare room with his clothes completely folded. So it was weird. Like, why is he in his spare room? Clearly he lives in that room, and he's lying there just on the bed, and sweatpants on, huge like basketball bulge in the crotchal area with a wet spot on top. And I'm like, what the hell is that? Like, why is that happening? But the rest of him was also filled with gas. So his testicles filled with gas. I mean, and it's just something you don't, it's so weird and off-putting, but happens. It's just really, and he had not, this is the thing I learned, he hadn't released. So there was almost no odor in this room. Yeah. So when they came, I was told, we're going to move him. How's your stomach? I go, not good. I dry heave it at like everything. If you talk about poop too much, I'm like, what? He's like, well, hold on to yourself there, buddy, because it's going to get bad. And sure enough, like soon as you move him, it is absolutely brutal. And, but I look back and I go, you know what? Thank the good Lord that we were there to deal with it, not the family. We were there to absorb that for them and take care of it. I'm thankful that someone, hopefully some lawman or medic or somebody will be there to take care of me when I'm about to pop. You know what I mean?
We all do. Yeah, we all go. And there's something kind of ignoble about death. That's not, you just don't want your spouse or loved one to have to deal with that. So it's a service that police have to kind of, I don't know, be the sin eaters of. We're the ones that sort of eat that hardship and hopefully save the other people for. So it's pretty bizarre though.
Yeah, absolutely. Bizarre. But after moments like that, deaths and bad things that happen, like the next Sunday in church, I pray harder. I look at my kids different. I feel more grateful. You know what I mean? It's almost,
I do.
It taxes you, but it's like, it's a gift because you kind of you reassess what's important. And you're going home to this family that's wonderful, and I got a great wife.
Yeah.
And it's like, man, I'm living in paradise, and I only got to walk in hell for 8 hours. You know what I mean? These people are, a lot of them just, that's their life, and it's, I can't even fathom it, So yeah, the job definitely opens your eyes to that stuff. So Marc, can you tell me the most intense or terrifying moment on the job?
Well, I've been in fights where I thought that I was going to lose. I think that was pretty terrifying. We chased a guy up. We not to get political, but after Ruby Ridge, I was assigned to North Idaho, and so it was me and one other deputy, and we were basically assigned to work there to show everybody, hey, these guys have kids in school. They're normal people. It's not the jackbooted thugs that you feel like the government is. And it was a really hard place. It's a beautiful place, absolutely beautiful.
I heard it is.
But the Aryan Nation was really strong. The anti-federal sentiment was very strong, and it's kind of a tough place to raise a young family. We were there right before we came here, but we had a guy who had holed up on a mountain with an older lady. Like, he was in his mid-30s. She was in her 60s, and he had married her to get her Social Security, basically, in her food store. She was a prep, kind of, didn't call them preppers back then, but she was a prepper.
Right. Ahead of her time.
Ahead of her time. And so they'd gone up on this mountain with a teenage boy, and they had built their little stockade compound up there. And I'm talking way up the mountain. And he had put booby traps out and all of that.
Wow.
Well, I called my headquarters and I said, and this guy was bad. He had kidnapped a Jewish couple over in Spokane, held them at gunpoint for a couple of days. He had murdered another guy, another white supremacist, because he thought he had a kill list, and this other guy that was part of his unit, if you will, he thought he was going to rat him out. So he murdered him, and then he was up there in the woods. So I called our headquarters and said, hey, we got this guy up there. The FBI is looking for him. We have a warrant on him for federal parole. And parole had been abolished by then, but there were still people that had parole, so we still had a few. And, of course, our headquarters was, no friggin' way are you going to go do a raid in North Idaho on a mountain with a kid, and there's just no way. So we ended up luring him off the mountain, basically by telling him that he was super prejudiced, just very violently prejudiced. And at that time, the director of the Marshal Service was a Hispanic guy named Gonzalez. And so we just made up this character named Gonzalez we said he was in town to buy guns, and he was going to be over at this place, and he had some girls with him, and it incensed this bad guy so much that he came down off the mountain to kill our guy. Basically, we had an informant, and the informant said, I'll give him that information that he can sell some guns, and he'll really come down.
The world's biggest a-hole.
Oh, man. And so we lured him down off the mountain, and it was me and an FBI agent and a couple of other Boundary County deputies and Bonner County deputies up in Priest River, Idaho. And we had this pretty good plan where we were going to pinch him right in the middle of a bridge away from the little town and get him as he's coming in. So he comes riding off the mountain with his bicycle, and he's got a Ruger GP100 in his back pocket. He's got a 1022 sawed off in his backpack. He's got duct tape and gloves and bear spray and another pistol, but I can't remember what it was.
So this is like a bad dude, and you guys probably...
he is a bad guy.
Back of your mind, you're thinking, we can't get bad PR for this.
Oh, exactly.
What
so
a
he's
nightmare.
Super bad. So we're on the radio. We're talking. The informant says he's coming down. We got eyes on him, but we're going to get him in the middle of the bridge because we don't want him to shoot it out with us. Well, the agent, I don't know what he saw. He saw something I didn't. But the FBI agent pulls up alongside him before he got to the bridge, and I'm barreling up to meet him in the bridge. As the agent pulls up, he sees the gun. And so he just like bumps him off the road on his bicycle. So he goes tumbling. I scream up, jump out of the car. I can't remember if it was Bonner County or Boundary County, one of the two counties up there in North Idaho, the top two counties. One of those deputies gets out, the FBI agent gets out, and we're jumping on top of the guy, and he's fighting, and there's guns everywhere. We're pressing him down to the ground. In the meantime, a nurse pulls over, and she thinks there's been a wreck. So she tries to pull us off and say, I'm a nurse, I can help you out. So we're trying not to elbow her in the nose. But the most chilling thing, I think, of that whole thing, and I mean, we had control of him, but the most chilling moment to me in probably my entire career was when I got him handcuffed. The only reason I was able to, get him handcuffed so easily is the Boundary County guy was humongous, the deputy. So he held him down. Yeah. I ratcheted on the handcuff, and I picked the guy up, and his whole face is covered with, grass and weeds and whatever. And this guy turns around and looks at me, and dead serious, he said, "It is obvious to me that you are more racially pure, or I'd have shot you. I would have won. You would never have won, but you are more racially pure than me, so you win." Whoa. And then he commenced to put him in my car, and he commenced to confessing to killing this guy and explaining why he killed him. And he was just such a cold, from being in law enforcement, we meet tons of people that do evil acts, but very few evil people. We meet some, certainly. Sure. But by and large, most of the people we meet make either bad decisions or really horrible decisions, but it's either, for whatever reason, I'm not making excuses, it's horrible decisions. But as far as what I would call a really evil SOB, I probably met 15 at the most, like want to see your soul die kind of an evil. And this guy is one of them. He ended up getting the death penalty. He actually testified in his own behalf in state court for the murder. And the sheriff's department's up there and the FBI, and he took us to the body. We had to have all kinds of, armed escorts and all that. We needed some sort of evidence besides just his confession. And he told us that he hit the guy in the mouth with a gun before he shot him and broke his tooth out. And so we set out in front of this little cabin, and it had pea gravel in the driveway. Yeah. We set out in front of this like archaeologists for 2 days with little sifters until one of those deputy sheriffs found that tooth. Really? And then we were able to corroborate. But so he went to court, he testified, and I'll never forget, he stood up, raised his hand, and he wouldn't take an oath on a Bible, but he said in front of the jury, he said, "I promise to tell the truth as long as it benefits me." And the judge said, "Well, jury can take that however they want to take it." And they found him guilty within 15 minutes, and then he got the death penalty. But then there were some issues with Idaho law, and he ended up getting commuted. So he's still doing life in Idaho. But just a chilling dude. So not a shootout, to me, that emotional, that real person, like the kind of boogeyman that you're really scared of. Mm-hmm. That's way more chilling to me than somebody just trying to fight me.
Oh yeah, because a guy like that would snatch your life, your wife, your kids without even
absolutely
no empathy,
no compunction at all.
Yeah, I dealt with a few characters like that, but the one that I've talked about on the podcast before was a pedophile, and I was booking him, and he just looked at me as I'm fingerprinting him, and he's like, "Is it really bother you to have to deal with a person like me?" Like just a total psycho, And I'm like, "Listen, this is my job, man. I deal with people like you all the time." He's like, "Even people with things that I do." I'm like, "Man, you are not going to break me down here. I'm about to floor you in this booking room." So this friggin' guy, we found a journal, and he had been, he wrote this journal about breaking down his second cousin, who's was 7, and he had things he had done and things he planned to do to make her a mindless sex slave to his private parts. And it was reading that and then having him in the next room, just, you have that feeling where you're just like, a person like this just needs to go. It's just it's every part of your being, but they need their day in court. They have to be protected. They have to be brought to court. Mm-hmm. That's the way it happens. But like you said, that those chills that go down your spine when you're like, this guy is evil. He might actually have a demon in his freaking body. This guy's bad.
Yeah, there are people. It's interesting you say that, because we're very careful in the Marshal Service, because we have, deputies go and they do arrests. There's another group of deputies that maybe work in court. Somebody may be protecting the judges. Somebody's bringing the prisoners back and forth.
Sure.
And there was a guy in fact, I don't know if he just died in prison or what. I can't remember his name. I didn't work the trial. I'd already moved to Alaska, but he kidnapped it's a famous case. It'd be easy to Google. He kidnapped a family in, like, I think in western Montana, and brought them through Idaho. And they might have been kidnapped in eastern Idaho, but somewhere in that area. And he viciously tortured and these are little kids. Took them out to a camp, viciously tortured them, videoed the whole thing, killed the little boy, made the little girl watch. Then she got away, and he was arrested. So they had him in jail. So it was really wise, because we're humans. I mean, police officers are human beings.
Sure.
And so the supervisor that was running the chief that was running the trial, and the supervisor, they brought in outside deputies from all around the country, and they said, all right, you are gonna work the trial. You're gonna have to sit in here with the jury and listen to all this crap, but you're never gonna touch the bad guy. We're gonna have another group of deputies that come out, and they know how bad he is, but they don't have to watch the videos. They don't have to listen to the testimony. So they come in from the outside. They never go into the courtroom. They're the ones that cuff him, take him back and forth to jail, because it's just safer that way. And then they immediately had our peer support group there to be able to let the deputies in court download, because we're all family people, men and women that have our own families. And they did for a tragic, horrible, evil situation, they did a really good job in making sure that the law enforcement officers involved came out of it, certainly not unscathed, but at least as good as, with the least amount of sacrifice possible.
Wow. I never even thought about that. That's really interesting. Wow. Yeah. I'm sure anybody involved wants to relieve that guy of his, eject his soul from his body for him.
Yeah. There are certain crimes that are they transcend the mission and you just don't want to deal with them.
Absolutely. Marc, can you tell us a situation that you'd consider heartwarming in your career?
Yeah, lots. I've had really good experience with probably I'm gonna steal from my son, and because he never told me this war story, I heard it tangentially. But as a father of a police officer and parents of a police officer, it's kind of I tell the story all the time. He's been on for about 6 years now. He's a SWAT officer. He's a very capable young man. But he's when he was on field, from what FTO is horrible. And anytime I'd mention to one of my friends, hey, here's my son, give him some advice, and every time they go, just stick it out through FTO. Just, buddy, it's not like that. It's not, because they're notorious here for taking you to McDonald's and making you fill out an application because you're never going to make it as a cop. It's just really,
that's awesome.
This process that's just awful. So he went through FTO, but while he was in FTO, I was thinking, at least he's got somebody with him. At least he's okay because he's out there, but still, it was hard.
Yeah.
And then the day came when he was by himself, and he worked midnights, and he was by himself. And my wife was fine, and I was just a nervous wreck. Talk about praying harder.
Yeah.
And just keep him safe, whatever.
Yeah.
I finally told my wife, why aren't you, what's the matter with you? Why aren't you nervous? He's our youngest.
Yeah.
And she very seriously looked at me and said, Marc, this is new to you. I've been feeling this feeling for 30 years.
Oh.
And I thought, okay, all right, I should shut up.
Wow.
But so he went out on his own. At that time he was not married, and he would come over periodically, and we were chatting, and he said, yeah, I had to do a death notification by myself, which is like one of his first since he was out on patrol, since out off FTO.
Those suck.
And he said it was really a tragic thing. This guy had been on drugs for part, it seemed like he was part of the drug culture, but he got out of it. He was getting his life squared away, and his baby needed formula. They were out of formula in the house. So he went to the store to buy formula, and some of his old crew found him and killed him, shot him and killed him. And so he had to go back and make the death notification and talk to this poor lady who it was not your, I hate to generalize, but not your quote unquote typical doper group, this was a upcoming middle-class family that was really trying hard. And so he makes this death notification, and that's what he said. Yeah, it was really tough, and so he told me that story. So I thought that was the end of the story. And then a friend of mine a couple of days later said, you might want to check the newspaper out. There's something about your son in there. So I looked at it, and there was a letter to the editor from the lady who had gotten the death notification.
Yeah.
And she said, I want to, and she told her story. Basically, she was asking for information about her husband. Please, this is the situation. He's clean, but he's turned his life around, and the story I just told you. Please, if you know anything about it, please tell me. And then she said, I would like to thank the Anchorage Police Department for being so kind in the way they handle this. And then she said, I would like to thank Officer so-and-so who gave the death notification because he saw the problems that I was having and that we didn't have any baby formula. And so he went and bought me some on his own and brought it back to me.
Wow.
And when I talk to young men and women about police work, it's fun to tell war stories. It's all, and he'll probably get mad at me if he ever listens to this because he wouldn't have ever told me about that.
Sure. Proud moment for you.
When you realize that it really is about the people, and if you have to get down and dirty with somebody and tase them or take a life or whatever, then you have to do it. But really it's about, I got into police work because I used to watch Adam 12, and they hardly ever got in shootouts. It was about solving problems and helping folks out. And if you can keep your humanity, but still be willing to become uncivilized at the drop of a hat, then it's probably the right job for you.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it, for sure. That's you must have been so proud of your son when you read that.
Oh my gosh, I got a little misty eyed when I just told you about it. It was like I say, he'll probably be upset with me when he hears this, but it was that's what you want, and I have to hand it to Anchorage PD because when they interviewed me, and I knew the lady that did his background, from working task forces and stuff.
Yeah.
The people they're looking for aren't. You can train somebody to be a door kicker. You can't train somebody to be kind. They're kind or they're not generally. And so they're really looking for folks that, like I said, have the ability to spool up, but their general demeanor is one that diffuses situations instead of other way around. And we need folks like that.
Absolutely. We've all worked with that cop that shows up and causes the problem. Like, oh, he's here, so now there'll be a fight. It's like, or he comes in the booking room and you go, this psycho's being pretty quiet, but you're not going to let that happen. You're not going to let it stay like that, are you?
Exactly.
We don't need more of those guys.
Exactly. We always say losing that person is like gaining two good men when you just get rid of that one person.
Absolutely. Well, Marc, thank you so much for coming on the podcast, man. This has been a great interview. Fun. It was really cool. It's really an honor that you came on. And what can we tell the folks about finding your book? Came out the 27th of April, third book in the series for Arliss Cutler, Bone Rattle. Where can we get it? Amazon and where else?
Yep. Yeah, Amazon, really anywhere books are sold. It's on Audible. It's Barnes & Noble, your any kind of indie bookstores. They're just mystery crime novels set in Alaska, and some of the stuff is drawn from my experience, but it's way cooler than Arliss Cutler is way cooler than I ever was. So yeah, they're fun books. I love it. And I will certainly put a link to all that stuff in the show notes, and I'll put a link to it on our website. And I don't want to bother you, but I feel like I could have you on again for another 2 or 3 hours. If I could ever get you back, I'd love to hear some more stories. Hey, love to. I hope we didn't bore people, but I love talking police work. I always tell people being a arguably successful novelist is the second best job in the world, and being a deputy marshal to me was the best job ever, and I miss it every day, every day.
That's awesome, man. Thank you, Marc. And hey, I'm going to do the outro, and then can you just hang on the line? I'll be right with you. Hey guys, that was episode number 75 with Marc Cameron. Wow, those were some great stories. First U.S. Marshal to come on the podcast. I got so many more questions popping up for him, but we're over an hour already. So hopefully, maybe in the future, we could talk him into coming back. Thank you for listening. Thank you for continuing to rate and review the podcast on iTunes. I know I'm like a broken record with it, but it really does help because when people search law enforcement podcasts, how many ratings or reviews you have kind of dictates where you'll show up in the search. And we've been kind of at the top of that because of how much you guys like the show and the ratings you give us. So it just helps us get guests like Marc Cameron. If you could just, take 30 seconds to give a 5-star review and even maybe just write a little blurb, that would be fantastic. Go to thingspolicec.com. You can apply to be a guest there. Just scroll down and click on Be a Guest. Also, you can buy some merchandise there with our little 80s retro logo. And thank you so much. And go check out Marc's new book. It's the third in the series for Arliss Cutler. Rave reviews. He's clearly a great communicator, great writer. So go check him out. So thanks, guys. Till next time.